Greetings sailors and welcome back to World of Warships, and I guess what is technically a first look video but kind of isn't, because basically I don't have much new to say about the Mainz now that it's been released. I did a work in progress look at it back in, was it late December, early January? I can't remember. It was around the turn of the year anyway. And everything I said then basically still applies. It's not radically changed since that point. I think the version that I showed off in that video, there was a difference between that and this release version in terms of the turret rotation, but I think everything else is pretty much the same. There might be one or two minor things I've missed, but that was the only major thing I can think of. So it's basically an Admiral Hipper class with light turrets, and to give you a rundown of the differences that I mentioned in that work in progress video, it's basically it's higher in the water, it's got worse armour but much better torpedo protection, and of course it has the German extra penetration on its HE shells. So in a way that makes it quite appealing at the moment. You don't have to sacrifice fire chance to take the IFHE skill. You can just take Demo Expert and, well, I mean, it's not like it's got a great fire base chance to begin with, but you're not getting that penalty. This is a very cut down first replay, by the way. If I showed both of the matches I picked in their entirety, it would be a 40-minute long video, and I decided that was a bit too much. In this first match, it was essentially me getting a free ride for most of it. I barely get shot at until like 3/4 of the way through, if not more. So this isn't really necessarily an accurate representation of this ship's capabilities. I used it so you could get some idea of what the gunner is like and what kind of damage numbers it can attain. But like in any cruiser, if they don't shoot back at you, well, it makes things considerably easier, and that's certainly the case in this one. Oh, one of the other things I forgot to mention is, in terms of differences, I think it still has the worst surface detection of the Eugen and the Hipper as well, so that was one of the other things. Yes, but anyway, you can go and watch that other video for a full rundown, or use something like the WOW's fitting tool website, which is a rather useful utility. I'll give that a shout out, to have a detailed rundown of the differences yourself. So overall, I kind of like it. I'm going to say that right now. It's quite a solid, non-gimmicky cruiser. It has good range. You've got German Hydro, you've got that German HE penetration, you've got the same torpedoes, so it's just an all-round fairly nice package. It's just squashier than the Eugen and the Hipper. Eugen because it has the heel, and Hipper, and well, both Eugen as well, because they have the 27mm plating as versus the 25mm plating that this gets all over, which opens it up to 15-inch guns in a way that Hipper and Eugen aren't. Still has a 40mm plate on the bow, which is quite handy on the lower part of the bow, so if you can get people to bounce stuff on that, then it's fine. But it does mean that there's a greater range of guns that can hurt you, so you can't be quite as aggressive as you can in the Hipper or the Eugen sometimes when you're facing an opponent that you know you can bow tank a bit. I mean, for instance, in either of those ships, this Bayern's guns would really not be a particular threat. They're 15-inch guns, but even with the tier difference, even with the poor pen, well, there's the possibility, if you shot me through the bow right now, that it could actually Citadel me. Because the fore and end plating of the Citadel, I seem to remember there were some armour differences in that as well, versus the Eugen and the Hipper. But yeah, if he turns his attention on me right now, that could be unfortunate. But no, he's concentrating on this Bismarck that I came over here to support, and so I'm just yet again more of a free ride, just getting to try out my AP ammo a bit and rack up yet more damage, which is quite nice. It's hard to complain about that. Overall, this match is not going well, though. We're down to 3 players. On the other flank, it's now just my division mate, Fu was here, who's one of my Patreon supporters. And there are enough healthy enemies left that even though we are quite close on points, I mean, I'm the only one of us, I think, that had any kind of hit points at this stage. And this is towards the time when I'm going to start losing my hit points. I could, of course, have stuck with the Bismarck to head across and try and help out Fu, who's been caught in a position where he has to reverse away from the enemy. And instead I decided that getting a cap was more important. I'm not sure if me going over there would have really materially made a difference. It might have. I don't think, well, I wouldn't have gotten there in time to see to save Fu, as you can see, but I might have been able to help out the Bismarck a bit. But as it was, I got this, I capped, and I've got this now rather healthy looking Nagato firing at me, and I know there's a Cleveland that was headed back this way as well. So although we've now gotten it down to being fairly even on ships, it's just the lack of hit points available to us. I mean, I don't have the armor and the Bismarck doesn't have the health, so yeah. If I was in a Prince Eugen, this might be a bit more doable, except I'd be firing a lot more slower. But I'd have the heal available, I'd have the better armor available. So it might have been a bit better suited, but I probably wouldn't have been sat on quite this much damage just because of the lower rate of fire. So down to half health. There's not a lot left in this game now. The Bismarck died, and we've basically lost this. I think I just left this in just so you could see exactly how it ends. Overall, compared to other light cruisers at the tier, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say this is the squashiest. I've said it does feel squashier than the Eugen and the Hipper, but it's worth pointing out that they are somewhat exceptional at the tier in terms of being quite well armoured. A lot of the other tier 8 cruisers aren't so much. So if you compare this to, say, the Megami, which can have, of course, 155s or the 203s, this definitely feels a bit tougher than the Megami. And you've also got a bit of a less awkward turret arrangement going on as well. And of course the rate of fire is good as well. I mean, I can't even remember what the Chapayev has as a rate of fire, but this is 6 seconds base rate of fire, so it's kind of, you know, it sort of has compensations for being fragile-ish. It's not particularly a tough ship. If it was a really tough ship, I suspect they would have given it a much lower rate of fire. It would have like an 8 or maybe a 9 second rate of fire, which would make it particularly rough in terms of starting fires. And this is probably one of the reasons why it feels a better fire starter than a lot of German cruisers do, because you've got, for one thing, quite a lot of barrels available. You've got 4 triple turrets, and you've got a 6 second rate of fire. So this is the rare good German fire starter that's not actually, you know, relying on like secondary guns or something to do it. So 155k at the end of that, 1600 XP on a loss. But yeah, I just had a free ride for most of that, didn't I? I really didn't get shot at until the end. And so, although the XP is good, although the damage is certainly good, it wasn't exactly a game that was challenging. I just got lucky there more than anything else. The next one I've picked out, though, will be rather more challenging. For one thing, it's not going to be a same tier game, or a top tier game rather. It's going to be a bottom tier game, and it's also going to involve enemies actually shooting back at me a bit more, which is not that fun when you're in a bottom tier cruiser. As you can see then, the matchmaking is actually not too bad considering it's tier 10, but I would certainly rather be in this thing than, say, the Cleveland in this situation, or even the Megami, just because it doesn't have necessarily the best range to work with. It's just a nice package overall, this, you know. it doesn't have anything that's especially gimmicky about it, like I've said, and although some people might not find it especially exciting, it's nice to see premiums still being added, which are just, you know, ships that are solid, good at what they do, and actually still represent something different than is available on the main line. Because there isn't really an equivalent of this in the main German line. It's all heavy cruisers. And of course the other two that are being tested at the moment, the Odin and the Aegea, are very much more on the side of being gimmicky ships. So a bit of a risky turn to start this one off with, but I've gotten away with it so far anyway. I wanted to basically give this destroyer some support, and then immediately thought better of trying to go around the north side of that island there. So hence the awkward turn, but anyway, yeah, it could have gone a lot worse there, certainly. But sometimes even the best players, it's not just myself, obviously, you know, best player in World of Warships, everyone knows this. Sometimes you second guess yourself, or you change your mind and you know, get away with it or don't. It's always a different experience watching somebody stream than it is watching a replay, even if it's someone who's a very good player, unlike myself. Because they make mistakes far more than you would think, but they also are able to capitalize on enemy mistakes more often, and just, you know, do better overall. So even though they still make mistakes, it's like, my point is, everybody makes mistakes, and I don't know what point I'm going for here exactly, but something, you know, don't feel bad for making mistakes, I guess. Anyway, so far, nobody has any caps. The Z46 is just stationary in their smoke, and that's not going to go well for them because, of course, the Daring has got their own hydro, short range though it is. And the Z46, you would think, would have known that, but sadly didn't take the opportunity to bail out, so they're out of the picture. And our Shimmer is now also opening fire, and although the Shimmer's guns can pack a punch, of course it cannot begin to match the Daring in terms of its rate of fire. So I definitely need to try and give some help here. There's also an Amalfi that's drawing very close to the Shimmer, so that Shimmer is not looking in a good way at all right now. But the good news is that's 2 enemy destroyers down. The bad news is the Shimmer's also going to die shortly as well. I'm not entirely sure why they don't smoke themselves here, or well, there we go, they've waited until it's a bit too late, really, and lost most of their health in the process, and they're not going to die immediately here, but yeah, they're not going to last too much longer at all. So just making a slow-ish turn here. This isn't a super manoeuvrable ship or anything. It's possibly a good idea to take the rudder shift module on it, just to give it that little bit of extra oomph, because you will be kiting away a lot. It does at least have a decent turret arrangement for that. You've got 6 barrels available whichever way you're pointing the ship. And so, yeah, I'm just hoping to set more fires and hoping not to get shot at too much, but unlike that previous game, as I've said, that is certainly going to happen this time. And that Kreuzer is uncomfortably close. The Iowa at least is a little further away. Don't need to worry about them so much. I can dodge them a little bit better, but yeah, the Kreuzer could potentially hurt me. If they can hit me, of course, with German dispersion. I mean, it's a bit better than it was. Did I say Kreuzer? That's a Thunderer. Why did I think that was a Kreuzer? I don't know. I don't know, brain. That doesn't even look that like it on the mini-map. No, why did I think that? I don't know. This is... it's one of those days. It's always one of those days. Anyhow. It's a bit of a stalemate overall so far. I mean, they are capping the middle, but we're capping A. We've lost 2 destroyers. They've lost 2 destroyers. This flank appears to be the flank where both teams don't have a particularly huge number of ships. We are outnumbered a little bit. In theory we aren't. In theory the Hindenburg is here, but they're drawing towards the centre instead, so we can't really rely on them. So it's basically me and this friendly battleship, which is a de Grosser. Maybe that's where I was pulling the de Grosser from. I don't know. I don't know, brain. You move in mysterious ways. So we can't really take this cap, but we can hopefully stop them from taking this cap. And I'm really just trying to set fires at this point, which is, I don't know, maybe me being a little greedy for damage, but sometimes you have to take the risks and fire guns and hope you don't get shot too badly in response. But even though I haven't taken any particularly big hits so far, I'm already down to about, what's that, 55% health? And I've only got 30k damage on the clock myself, so far this is much less good. This is about what I would expect being down-tiered in most cruisers at this tier, at least most less well-armoured cruisers. So that even if you don't necessarily take the big hits all at once, even some of the smaller hits can still sap your health quite considerably. So with them capping C, me and this de Grosser have pulled back, and that's put me in range of that Bismarck, but unfortunately me firing at the Bismarck has gotten me shot by the Thunderer, who was firing AP shells, which is a rare enough sight these days. So that's a further huge chunk of my hit points gone, and now I will be a fairly easy one-shot for anyone if I get unlucky. A couple of pens is basically all it's going to take. Even over pens would take a considerable amount of my remaining health at this stage, so I'm going to have to disappear for a little bit, and that's precisely what I do. I'm going to reposition myself and hope that that de Grosser can stand the heat for a while. They've still got a decent amount of health, but they are now pulling back in against those two battleships, although it looks like they're using that island for cover, so they're not being completely gung-ho about it. They're not completely suiciding in, as you occasionally see battleships do. They just get a sudden rush of blood to the head and decide that they're, I don't know, going to be Klingons and that today is a good day to die, and before you know it, you've lost a battleship in a key position and everything's looking rather less rosy than it was before. But overall, it's actually, having said that, you know, in this particular scenario, no, they're not doing that, and things are actually looking alright at the moment. I mean, less alright in that this Thunderer is more than capable of shooting at me, but it looks like it's actually the Iowa that is, so that gives me a little more reaction time on the shells, fortunately. We've also got the middle, which is nice, and over towards the A cap, they've pushed the enemy team away from there. And so, although we're losing ships at about an even rate, if we can keep a hold of that B cap, that might stack up to be enough of an advantage to give us the win. And at this stage, I think it behooves me more just to stay alive than anything else. So I'm really trying to be a bit more restrained, and you know, all these, got these ships that are within firing range, but I'm trying to pick out the targets that hopefully won't be able to shoot me back too much. But of course, being a low health cruiser, you're always going to be a temptation, and the Iowa is certainly full of health enough that, well, if they want to pick on me, it's not like they're going to be going down soon, unlike this Thunderer, who I'm trying to help dispose of. But the Iowa can't seem to make their mind up, fortunately. They've been pointing their guns at me, pointing their guns elsewhere, so that's been not too bad so far. And now with the smoke that the Loyang's just put down, that actually gives me freedom to just fire away as much as I like, for at least as long as I have the smoke between me and them. The bad thing about that de Grosser using the island for cover is they've put themselves in a position where they've now got to basically do a 3-point turn to get out of there, so They're not going to be able to help for the next little while. And the enemy team is also now starting to take the middle once again. And the main cruiser that could maybe help with that, the Donskoy, is of course down here with me. And the Hindenburg, who is still pretty healthy themselves, they've gone all the way over to the other side. And, well, you know what I was saying about charging in a battleship, sometimes people do that in cruisers as well, and it sort of looks like that's what the Hindi is doing. Instead of playing sensibly and trying to secure the middle, which we do really need back, they're just charging towards the enemy team. And that's multiple enemy ships they're trying to engage there, so we'll see how that goes for them. So Greuzer has unstuck themselves from that island. We're forcing the Iowa back. Trying to get to this smoke, although I think it probably will be dispersing fairly soon. But as the Iowa is now moving north and there's island cover between us, I can just fire away anyway and hopefully set some more fires. That would certainly be a jolly useful thing to do at this point. Sap their strength even further. And with the Loyang going for the middle, hopefully we can retake that again, because we do have a lead for the time being, but the gap is closing. Of course, even if we don't have the middle, we can now take this cap with the de Grosser starting to cap, but of course they'll get spotted and actually decapped. It's kind of hard to cap in battleships a lot of the time. There would certainly need to be a bigger separation between the de Grosser and Iowa before they could stealthily do so. Anyway, there's the last remaining destroyer, who is going for our Kitakaze. No, our Hindenburg rather. The Kitakaze is the destroyer. I'm doing well with the names today. And yeah, because the Hindi just basically ignored the possibility of the destroyer being in the middle, they've managed to get themselves killed and not really contributed a whole lot to this game, unfortunately. And that's not a kill that we could afford right now. We need all the ships to survive that we possibly can, and the Hindi is a strong top tier ship. Well, I say strong, it's a pretty good top tier ship. I don't precisely know how well the Hindenburg fits in the tier 10 cruiser meta these days. I've only just acquired one myself in the last, was it last month? It took me a while to grind through the rune. I've only played a couple of games in the Hindi. I'm kind of in the situation with my ships that I grind through so many at such a pace that by the time I've gotten to the tier 10s, it's like, well, I still have all these other grinds to do, and then I barely play the tier 10s that I've just unlocked. So yeah, I have all these tier 10s that I've barely played. Although in some cases I've actually played them quite a lot, like the Shiba and the Grosse Kurfürst, which is still my favourite tier 10 battleship, I think. So this is a definite risk, but that Amalfi is too tasty a target to ignore. I might take a bit more damage in the process, down to less than 10,000 health, but I'm now unspotted once again, and with us having taken the middle, and not having capped C, but it's now available for me to cap, I can basically grab it and we can consolidate this points lead. I have no idea why the Loyang came over here as well. They basically had seen me heading towards the cap, saying in chat I was heading towards the cap, and, you know, only got there to get the last couple of cap points themselves. I basically got like 99% of it, so yeah. Bit of an odd decision, but at this stage of the game it really doesn't matter. I've sped all this end bit up because it's basically us just sitting it out. We have the points lead. We're going to lose one more of our battleships. I think it's the one over in the west. And although it's a bit, you know, if this was on more of a knife edge, it would be a bit bad to have lost a battleship at this stage. We've accrued such a points advantage, and we just managed to have enough map control all through this that, yeah, there's a huge gap in the points. So even if it hadn't run down on time to the full 20 minutes, we would have gotten to 1,000 points even after losing that. Well, it was the de Grosser, as it turned out. So yeah, there were some not brilliant decisions by some teammates in that one, and I possibly took a few unnecessary risks myself as well at times. But overall, despite that coming down to us having slightly fewer ships, we were able to maintain that cap control and win it in the end with a pretty comfortable lead. And I was able to do enough damage myself, and you can see actually about a third of my damage there was just from fires, that I placed at the top of the team, but rather less credits made than the previous game, just because of that difference in damage. So I suspect games will generally be a lot more like this than the previous one, where I was just untouched for so much of it. But if you've played cruisers through the high tiers at all, you should get on fairly well with this ship. It really isn't doing anything different or spectacular in terms of its gameplay or playstyle compared to other ships of different nations. It's just there isn't, as I've said, anything that's particularly comparable for this nation. The only light cruisers you have are, well, it's what, Nuremberg tier 6, and this is definitely less squashy than a Nuremberg. You know, you've got a well-trained Nuremberg captain, or even any German demo expert captain would fit well in this ship, to be quite honest, and you should do okay with it. So that about wraps it up for this video. Hopefully you found it useful and you haven't found my brain derps too derpy, which, well, that's the reason why some people watch my videos, I guess. So all that's left to say is wash your hands. Definitely wash your hands. I know what you've been up to. Well, that sounded creepy. And if you did enjoy it, you can, hit the like button, sub to my channel if you haven't already, and as always, stay tuned for more.